How to integrate Cucumber with Jenkins. You may have heard of behavior-driven development in the past, but have you ever tried it out? In this video, I'm going to walk you through a simple example of how to use Cucumber and then integrate it with Jenkins. Here's today's starting point. I have a Jenkins LTS controller, version 2.319.2, and attached to the controller, I have a Linux-based agent. Down in the description of this video is a link to a gist that has all of the commands that I'm running from the command line. So to get started, I'm going to go over to my terminal. I'm in my GitHub directory. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a GitHub repository. It's going to be named Jenkins Example Cucumber. I'm going to go ahead and have it create a Maven git ignore file for me. It's going to be a public repository, and I'm saying go ahead and clone it into the directory that I want. So I'm going to go ahead and click on enter. And as it finishes up, now I've got my repository, but before I CD into that repository, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and use a Maven archetype to generate my starting point. And what I'm saying here is create a group ID of com-planet-pope-cucumber. The artifact ID is Jenkins Example Cucumber, which is the directory that was just created for us. The archetype group ID and archetype artifact ID is the Cucumber archetype, and I'm specifying version 7.2.3. At the time of recording, that is the most recent version. So let's go ahead and hit our enter key and give it just a few seconds to start up. And then once this archetype completes, then I will have a basic starting point from where I can go ahead and start creating my Cucumber tests. So that's complete. Now it gives me a warning that, hey, the directory already exists. I know that because I just created the repository on GitHub, cloned it down, and what it did with the archetype is just put all of those files in that directory for me. So I'm okay with that warning. So I'm also going to go ahead and CD now into my directory. Okay. And just so we have a clearer space there, the next thing that I'm going to do is go ahead and install the Maven wrapper so I don't have to worry about having Maven on my agent. So now I've got my Maven wrapper ready to go. Before we go any further, let's go ahead and open it up in VS Code. You can choose your editor and use whatever you want. Here's my editor. Let me zoom in just a little bit. You can see here that we have our source directory with some files already created for us. We have our Maven W for our Maven wrapper creation, so we're doing okay. This is sort of what we expect. Let's go ahead and go into our command line again, and let's run Maven W clean test. Just based on the archetype, everything it created, does everything work, just to get started with. Now, before I actually run that, I need to go ahead and switch out my JVM version to Java 11. So let's do 11. So there's that one. Let's go ahead and check this out. I am using Java 11. You can use Java 8 if you want, whatever you want to do. I haven't tested this with Java 17. So got Java 11. Now let's go ahead and run our Maven W clean test. And as this runs, it should go pretty fast. I've run this a few times, so my Maven cache should be loaded up. I didn't have to download the internet this time. Nothing failed, so at this point, we're in good shape. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create our feature file. Now, this is something specific to Cucumber, and obviously I'm using Java here, so there are other flavors of Cucumber that you can use with different languages, but in this video, we're using Java. So I'm going to go to source test resources and then into my path here. So it's basically right where this git keep file is. I'm going to say Cucumber, new file, and I'm going to name it basic_math.feature. And what we're going to do is something that's extremely simple. We're going to do some basic math, as you can see from the name of the feature file. And the content of this file is, does the JVM know how to do math? In this case, we have a scenario called addition, and given that x equals 2 and y equals 2, when x and y are added, then the value should be 5. Okay, maybe not, but it's a failing test. So let's go with that for just a moment. And that's the first place that we start. So we've just created our feature. We haven't implemented any other code. So let's go ahead and save this file and go back over to our command line. And let's run our test again. So let's see what happens with the test. It sees the feature file, But then it says there are test failures. Well, of course there's test failures because we have not implemented anything to actually run the tests. One of the very interesting things about Cucumber is it will generate the code for you that you can use as a starting point within your test. So let's go ahead and copy these snippets that were generated for us. Now, as we go back into our code, what we're going to see is under source test Java, there are actually two files created for us from the archetype. There's run cucumber test, which is just the plumbing that's necessary in order to run cucumber test. Go figure, since it says run cucumber test. Let's take a look at step definitions. What we just copied from our shell is what we're going to put into our step definitions. Now, these step definitions have not been implemented, right? All they're doing at each one of these is just throwing a new pending exception. So let's go ahead and save this as is. No changes, we're just copying from our shell, putting it into step definitions. Let's go back over to our shell and let's run our code again. So we do our test. We expect test to fail, but now we have a different set of output. We see the scenario for addition, and it's failing on given x equals 2. And it's saying to do implement me. Well, if we go and take a look back at our code, what that is doing is giving us the to do. Now, there's also one other thing here. So we would expect this to fail basically what we just did. But we're also getting this output here for sharing the report and all this other content. What I want to do is I want to disable this message. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a junit-platform.properties file inside of source test resources. So let's do that. So we have source test resources, new file, junit-platform.properties. And the value that we're going to put there is cucumber publish quiet equal true. All right, we save that. Let's go back over to our console and let's run the test again. And what we should see this time is we just see our normal scenario failure, but we no longer see that big block in the middle. So we've now suppressed that output. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and delete this .getKeep file that was created with the archetype. We don't need this, and especially now since we have a file already existing inside of this folder. That's the reason why the getKeep file was there. So we have our basic math feature, our JUnit platform, we've modified step definitions, and dropped in the code that was given to us from when we ran Maven W clean test. Let's go ahead and run this one more time just to make sure that we're still good to go with our test goal here. Again, we still expect it to fail, but we know our plumbing is correct to be able to get to this point. So now let's go ahead and go back over and really implement our step definitions. So if I go back over here to step definitions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say private int x, private int y, private int sum, since we're going to be doing addition. And given that x equals whatever the int is, then what I'm going to do here is I am going to set x equal to int 1. And for y, I'm going to say y equals int 1. Whoops, I messed that one up. There we go. And then what we're going to say is when x and y are added, well, I need to implement a basic calculator. We'll get to that in just a second, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say calculator, which doesn't exist yet, calc equals new calculator. And there's numerous ways you could do this. And then I'm going to say sum equals calc.add x comma y. Seems pretty reasonable, right? Hasn't been implemented yet, but that's what we want to write. And then what I want to do is I want to do an assertion that my expectation, whoops, there we go, int 1 will equal sum, because sum will have been created in that step above. Now let's try to clean some of this up. We know calculator hasn't been created yet. We'll do that in just a second. The assert equals, we need to get this import fixed. So we'll add a static import for that. So all of that looks pretty good. So now we need to create calculator. Well, I'm going to go and create calculator in source, and I need to create a new folder, main/java/ all the things here. Whoops, Cucumber. And then inside of this directory, I'm going to create a new file called calculator.java. And what I'm going to do here is create a public constructor. I'm going to say public calculator. And I didn't need to do that. There, that's good enough for now. And now let's create a public int add. I'm going to say int x, int y. And I'm going to return x plus y. Okay, very simple, very basic addition. Let's go back to our step definitions. Let's go ahead and get rid of this import because it's not being used. And all of that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and run this. Go back over to our shell. I'll clear this out. Maven W, clean, test. Now we can see here that our scenario ran, given x equals 2 and y equals 2, when x and y are added, then the value should be 5. That was the basic scenario that I wanted to test. But we can see here that 5 was expected, but it was actually 4 because that's what the calculator said is x plus y, which is 2 plus 2 equals 4. So let's go ahead and go back to our feature. And let's change this 5 to a 4. We'll run our test goal one more time. And what we'll see here is that the scenario passed in all green. 2 plus 2 is 4. So now you're saying, okay, great, Darren, that's all good and well and wonderful. But what about Jenkins? That's where we're getting started here. So I wanted to be able to show you how you could create a simple Cucumber test to begin with. Now let's start wrapping it in with Jenkins. So let's go ahead and go into the root of our project. We're going to create a Jenkinsfile. And I'm going to copy this just so I don't mess it up. Very simple, very easy. Pipeline agent any, and we're just running the command that we've been running all along. Remember, using Jenkins as an orchestrator to do the things that you've been doing from the command line. It's a wonderful way to do things. So I'm saying sh maven w clean test. This is our starting point. So let's go ahead and make sure everything's the way that we want it. All of our files are here. Let's go ahead and commit this and say initial, even though really not initial. We'll go ahead and push that up. And now what I want to do is I want to go and grab the URL for this repository. So I'm going to say code. I'll use HTTPS. That's good enough. It's a public repository, so don't need SSH. Let's go and create a new job. I'm going to call this Cucumber. Pipeline. Click OK. We'll go down. Pipeline script from SCM. Git. Paste in our URL. I'm on the main branch. And the script path is Jenkinsfile. Click Save. And now let's go ahead and click on Build Now. Now for this one, it's probably going to take a little bit longer because this is a fresh agent, so we haven't downloaded the internet from Maven yet, so we'll fast forward through this. Now that it finished, we can take a look at the output from the test, and we see that we had one test run with no failures, errors, nothing skipped. So the test worked as expected, just like we saw it locally on our local development machine. Now you're thinking, okay, we ran the test, but this is a test. So I should be able to see some sort of report that is associated with that run. And if we take a look again at run 1, we don't see anything talking about tests at all. So let's go and modify our Jenkinsfile to include a JUnit call. And I'm putting this post along with our steps. I put this in the wrong place. Here, let's back that out. What I'm saying is, any XML file that exists within Surefire reports within any of the directory structure within my project, I want to go ahead and pull those into JUnit. So just adding in this one step, let's go ahead and add this in. I'm going to say added JUnit. Click on sync changes. And then let's go back over and let's run this job one more time. If we take a look at the output, what we're going to see, it will run a lot faster this time since we've already downloaded the internet from the previous time. We see a post stage recording the test results. That's okay. We see everything was still clean there. If we click on 2 here at the top, we can see the test result here is no failures, and it just gives us some basic information about the tests that were ran. In this case, it was just basic math. And you can click into it and see that there was addition and the standard output. Now there's also a plugin available for showing Cucumber-specific reports. So although the JUnit reports give us the information, it's not really useful from us from a reporting perspective. So let's go ahead and go back up to our controller, Manage Jenkins, Manage Plugins, and let's install the Cucumber Reports plugin. So Cucumber Reports, that's this top one. At the time of recording, the most recent version is 5.6.1. We'll click on the checkbox, download now, and install after restart. And now that we're back in, let's go back up to the dashboard. In order to use the Cucumber Report plugin, we need to make a modification because when you take a look at the documentation for the Cucumber Reports plugin, it requires a JSON file. Now, fortunately, we can make that change in our configuration for our Cucumber tests. And what we'll do is we'll go to source main test Java, and for run Cucumber test, which was one of the files that was created for us during the archetype creation, there is an entry in here that says plugin property name, and the value is pretty. If you were to take a look at the documentation for this field, what this is a comma-separated list of different output formats that you can have. One of these is JSON. So in order to create the correct JSON file that we need for the Cucumber Reports plugin to use, we're going to change pretty to pretty, JSON : and then we're going to specify the location for this Cucumber file. Now, just creating this here doesn't get us all the way done. We need to make a modification to our Jenkins file to also add in a Cucumber step. Now, what is this Cucumber step? Let me go back here. I'm going to copy this, and you'll see what it is in just a moment. So if we take a look at our definition for our job, and let's go ahead and click on Pipeline Script and select Cucumber, click on Advanced, and for the file include pattern, I'm going to paste in target/cucumber.json. I could have left some wildcards in, but for my case right now, I want to specify just this single file because that's the only file that I'm generating out of the report run. Let's scroll down and click on Generate Pipeline Script. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go back over into my Jenkins file, and right below JUnit, I'm going to paste in this Cucumber line. So the only change I made was the file to include. Let's go ahead and save this. We made 2 changes, one for our Jenkins file to add the Cucumber step, and one to the run Cucumber test to add in generating out the JSON file. So let's go ahead and say JSON for the commit message. Click on Sync Changes. And now let's go back over to our controller, and let's run this job. We'll click on Build Now. Take a look at the output of 3. Again, this should go pretty fast since we've ran this a couple of times already. When we run our clean tests, we get through all the startup, we run our test. Now we're recording the test results. That's our output from JUnit. And then we're saying using Cucumber Reports version 5.6.1. That was the version of the plugin that we installed. Copied some information around and success. Okay, let's go ahead and click on build number 3 here in the breadcrumb. What we can see here is we still see our test result, but look over on the left nav. There's now a new entry called Cucumber Reports. If you click into Cucumber Reports, you get this different looking UI that gives us the details of the features that we ran And in fact, you can go ahead and expand these completely out, see all of the steps if you had multiple steps, or you can collapse it. We can see that there were 4 steps passed. There was only 1 scenario and no failures. Now, there are other tabs you can click through and look at on this report, but that's the basics of using Cucumber with Jenkins. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach out to us on Twitter @CloudBees. If this video was helpful to you, give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to CloudBees TV yet, why not? Take a moment, click on that subscribe button, and then ring that bell, and you'll be notified anytime there's new content available on CloudBees TV. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.